Hey Sharon, I thought about this last night. When they continued the vending ordinance, they continued it to the September meeting. Not last night.
They continue to August.
August, yeah.
Yes.
But last night, they didn't mention anything about, it was just the study session, so it's already been
It's
continued.
already continued
Yeah.
from July 10th.
Okay, I woke up like, today.
No, I already thought, yeah.
I was like,
We're doing another notice.
no, I woke up in the middle of the night going, oh,
No.
are we going to have to renotice that?
Yeah, no.
The things I think about.
And then the mind starts going into that.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I thought about it again too.
Yeah, we're good.
All right, everybody, we ready? Good. All right. Welcome, everybody, to the July 20th Special Planning Commission meeting. I'd like to start off by welcoming and introducing new Commissioner Terrence Fugazi. Welcome. All right, moving on to the Pledge of Allegiance. Everyone, please stand. Thank you. Ariana, a report on posting the agenda and roll call, please.
The agenda was posted on Thursday, July 13th, 2023 at 2:10 p.m. Roll call. Commissioner Ellie,
Yes, present.
Commissioner Fugazi, Commissioner Leongard, Commissioner Lewis,
Here.
Commissioner Ramirez,
Here.
Vice Chair Kushner,
Here.
Chair Bondel.
Here. Thank you. Ariana, are there any public comments for items not on the agenda today?
There are no speakers.
All right. Thank you. Consent agenda. Any questions, comments, concerns for the last Planning Commission regular meeting minutes of June 1st? None?
I move that they be okayed as written.
I second that.
Oh, and for the new commissioner, you can vote on this item even though you were not present. There's a new rule about the minutes, so you don't have to be present at that meeting. You're just approving them that they're minutes, not what they say. So
Okay.
it's for record-keeping purposes.
So it looks like three of us seconded the motion through the online.
It'd go by the
tool.
first second, which is Kelly.
Okay.
Yeah.
Roll call.
Yes, please.
Commissioner Ellie,
Yes.
Commissioner Fugazi,
Yes.
Commissioner Leongard,
Yes.
Commissioner Lewis,
Yes.
Commissioner Ramirez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Kushner,
Yes.
Chair Bondel.
Yes. Thank you. That passes unanimously. On to public hearings. Craig.
Thank you, Chair Bundall. Commissioners, Craig Tambernini, Senior Planner with the Planning Department. So the item tonight before you is a request to approve a architectural and site review for a new industrial development in the Murray Los Alamos Overlay District. This is a light industrial zone that requires Planning Commission review for new buildings, given its location, which is considered sensitive because there's nearby residential development in the area. Other projects would go through a staff level administrative review, so this one's elevated to get some heightened design styles and to make sure there's no conflicts with the nearby residential uses. In this case, the project is located interior to the Murray Los Alamos district. This site vicinity map shows where it's located, and over here on Lincoln Court through Willie Court, those are the residential that's the residential neighborhood that interfaces with the overlay zone. So it's distant so that we won't have any direct conflicts from that respect with design and or use. So this site plan shows you what the property how the site plan would be laid out. This project's on one of 4 parcels in this area that are being developed. We recently approved a project, I believe it was on the opposite corner, that's moving forward, and then I believe we approved development here, but my memory's rusty right now. Fighting a cold, so I apologize. So the development is proposing a new industrial building with parking for the use and an outdoor AB yard, an aggregate base gravel yard in this area. This area is going to mainly be used to store construction equipment, and employee parking would be here on a permanent AC lot. There'd be a trash dumpster at the back corner of the lot, and then paved driveway access on both sides, and robust landscaping along the frontage, and of course a standard 6-foot wide sidewalk along the frontage as well. The project also includes space for long-term and short-term bike parking. The landscape plan just shows one area for bike parking, but this civil plan shows the 2 spaces where this would go. So this is views of the architecture. It's a standing seam metal building with a more robust architecturally styled entryway at the corner and some horizontal trellis elements, which is something that we like to see, some kind of horizontal element to break these buildings up, and this matches more or less the theme in that area. So this design, staff feels, is in keeping with what's been approved out in that area and appropriate for the site. So in brief, the analysis is that the project meets our industrial park general plan policies, which calls for design review. All of the industrial zoning standards are met for setback height. The design policies for Murray Las Almas overlay are met by the landscaping proposed and the design proposed. The architectural and site review, they're not findings per se, they're criteria. Those criteria are met with this design, that it provides adequate maneuverability, circulation, landscaping, and design elements. And last but not least, the project has been confirmed to be exempt from further environmental review under CEQA as an infill development project, meaning it does not have any need for any additional environmental review for the development within this existing industrial park. So our recommendation is to adopt a resolution determining that the project is exempt from CEQA and approving the project subject to conditions. We have a number of conditions attached to our resolution. I will point out that a lot of those are boilerplate. They're just typical development standards, but buried in there are some specific requirements. And I just wanted to point out a couple. One is that lighting is required to be shielded downward and away from adjacent properties. That's a standard condition number 11. The bicycle parking, there's 3 conditions related to that, but we do require the bike storage to be a certain type, inverted U racks, and have long-term covered parking. So they provide that. What's not in the condition but is required is they have to have EV parking too for the site. They have to pre-wire for, I believe, up to 4 spaces. It might be 2 or 4, but that would be caught at the building permit. They have to pre-wire for electric. They don't have to provide them. They have to pre-wire. That's a green building standard requirement. So those are things that would be caught up in the construction details. And then also wanted to note that we did receive a comment. We typically receive a comment from Gilroy Bicycle Pedestrian Advisory Committee, the community group. And their comments are pretty standard and uniform. They usually want us to add transportation demand management requirements to projects. We haven't adopted any formal policy to do that, and this is a small project, so there's really no nexus for that. They comply with the vehicle miles traveled goals of the city, which is to increase opportunities and employment opportunities in a more dense manner. So just building this building achieves that. They don't trigger any mitigations for that for that new development. So there wouldn't be any TDM measures that would be needed. But of course, the project is providing new sidewalk and bicycle facilities in compliance with the law and providing EV parking in compliance with the green building standards, which was one of their comments in the letter. They are asking, which is a common request, and it's not a poor request. It's not unusual. It's just that we don't have a standard to enforce this. But they're asking if the owner would include shower lockers and a fix-it station on the property, and we wouldn't require that. We don't have really any nexus to require that. If the applicant were to offer that, we'd certainly accept it, but it's not something we'd recommend as a condition of the project of this type or size. And then they asked a couple of questions in their letter with respect to how this is complying with the general plan. They wanted to know what the development's done to enhance pedestrian and bicycle access to transit. While this is in an industrial area and they're providing bicycle facilities and sidewalks, that meets their basic requirement. They want to know if plans were routed to the VTA. Yes, our plans are all routed to the VTA. That's the Valley Transit Authority and Valley Water. They're on our customary referral sheet. They had no comments or requirements related to this property. So I just wanted to be sure to touch on those points raised in this letter, to acknowledge them and explain what staff's determination and opinion is on that. And with that, I'll conclude my presentation. The applicant's got a representative here who can answer any questions you have. I don't believe they're planning to do a presentation unless you'd like to hear from them. And I'll open it up to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Craig. Commissioners, any questions? Of course.
I just want to say that thank you for helping me out with those questions regarding the sidewalk going all the way around that large I don't want to say,
Right.
swash of land, so that it'll be consistent all the way around, and then the shielding of the lighting, confirming that it will be required. And I think this is a handsome-looking building, and I was looking at the plants they were using. It's very nice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. I have a question regarding the landscape. Is that going to be a drought-tolerant plant, or is that something it's already determined?
Yeah, yes, we have a water efficient landscape ordinance that they have to adhere to. So they have to go and do an audit of their water capacity and what the water demand is for the plants, and they have to comply with that. So usually people do low or very low or medium type watering plants, and this conforms to that policy. I can't speak to its specific plant materials and the numbers, but that data is required from them, and they are required to comply with that water efficient landscaping.
I also would like to make a comment regarding the building appearance. Thank you for making the curb appeal look less squared and kind of break it down, and just something like a little touch that we all appreciate. Thank you.
Agreed. Thanks.
Any questions? I've got a couple. The first one is in the M1 zoning. I noticed that in the back lot where they're going to be parking equipment, they're going to be using aggregate base rock.
Correct.
Is that appropriate for that spot? I mean, dust control and...
Yes, it is. So aggregate base, essentially, if you've seen it, it's meant to become very solid. It packs down very tightly. It's almost as good as a road is with pre-asphalt. You can drive on it pretty regularly without it being disturbed or failing. So Public Works was asked to look at that and confirm that they'd be okay with that, and they're satisfied with that. It's almost an impervious surface at that point when you do the ag base. It just saves them since they may do further development or expansion, they want to grow this business. They're trying to, I believe, save a little bit of money doing something that they might have to tear up later. But the ag base is completely suitable. It's not dusty or won't. It's not like gravel. It won't get muddy. It'll be in good condition. It'll withstand a lot of weight in travel.
Perfect. Thank you. And the second question was the no fencing or screening. I know to the east of that was is the ice cream manufacturing or ice cream distribution center that is approved. So I know they may be putting a wall, but there's no other screening hiding their equipment, tractors.
Not that's been shown on the plan that I recall. I'm going to look to the designer just to confirm that.
So I did speak to the owner.
Well, if you can come up. But do you want him to come up now?
Of course.
Okay.
Of course.
Can you repeat the question, because I didn't quite hear it?
Yes, it says that there's no proposed fencing or screening around the property, and they're going to have equipment parked there, so I know visually it is.
Yeah, so I have to look at it. I thought there was. So good.
Good evening, Commissioners. My name is David Faria. I'm the civil engineer for this project from MH Engineering. I did speak to the owner regarding the screening prior to coming in today, and he said that if we need to do screening, he's more than happy to put up screening, whether it's in a chain link fence or a wall or whatever we need to do. And I do believe there was a condition related to the screening to where if there was storage materials or any other unsightly things that we would propose screening to.
Thank you. Yeah, I do recall that coming up. It's just been a while. My conversation with the with the owner was that if they're going to park vehicles in an orderly fashion, it's not going to be needed. But if they ended up storing materials, they'd have to put up screening. I'm looking at condition 21, and I don't know if that is the one that captures it. So I'd have to keep looking through here. But there's a condition 21 that just says that they shall show details for screening of all exterior equipment, including but not limited to mechanical equipment and other things. So it's a general condition that could be applied to outdoor equipment. And I would have to look through here and see if I've got another more specific condition, or if there's not and there's a desire to, we could make sure that that's included in there to explicitly say if there's outdoor storage, it shall be screened.
I think they would even wanted to do that because it just makes sense if they're storing, their trucks and and materials there. They don't want nobody to have access to that. So
That's exactly true.
I think it's just kind of common sense.
Yeah, I'd be anticipating it for security needs. But I just need to see if we had a condition that specifically addressed that or not, so that you can decide if you want to make it more robust or include it.
Would a chain link fence be considered screening?
Chain link fence would mainly be for security. Screen would need to have slats or be solid of some sort. I do recall that my sense was, given how far set back it is, I wasn't thinking that I'd be too concerned if they were to do some kind of chain link. But again, that's the commission. If you have differences of opinion on that or want to be more specific, certainly we could include something to ask for a more decorative fence or some other kind of fencing if the fencing is proposed. The fire department just has a condition that if there is fencing, it needs to comply with certain setback requirements, but that would be at the driveway frontage. So I'm just thinking of just the ag base area possibly needing fencing, and that we could look at that at the building permit stage and add any other requirements that the commission feels might be appropriate, if any.
So number 21 does reference screening, but it's not regarding vehicles. It's regarding equipment such as mechanical boxes, backflow devices, things like that.
Yeah, I was going to point out condition number 8, Craig.
Okay.
Yeah. So that one talks about the outdoor storage and parking of vehicles.
And I had a question, follow-up on...
Oh, yes, you're right. Condition 8 talks about requiring screening if they do anything other than vehicles and equipment.
Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you, Sharon.
The question, follow-up question about the aggregate. Now, is that going to be, and I'm not going to use, this is not my field of specialty, but for the aggregate parking area, is that the kind where there's sort of like a base that's open and then the aggregate is flushed over it so it sits inside?
Yeah, it's graded out. It's just like you're going to build any other parking lot and pave it. Ag bases typically put under roads and parking lots. So they'll grade it out, and then they'll put in 2 to 4 inches of aggregate base, which is an engineered rock that'll interlock and become very, very firm and stable.
Oh, okay, because when I Googled it, it showed like there was some sort of like open pavers, and then the aggregate was inside, that was like put inside the openings of those pavers.
It's typically just laid
Just-
on grade as
Okay.
a material. Yeah, another layer of material.
Thank you.
Commissioners, any more questions? All right, I'm going to open it to public hearing. Any public speakers?
There are no speakers.
All right, I'm going to move to close. Commissioners, any further discussions? All right, the floor is open for motion.
I'd like to move to approve, but with the condition of adding the screening, like some type of, at least at a minimum, a chain link fence with the slats.
I'll second.
Do I need to read the whole thing?
You would have to read the
I
whole
knew
thing,
that
yes.
was coming. Okay, let me get my reading glasses on. Oh, you covered it up. Let me go back to this. Oh, thank you. I move that we adopt a resolution determining the project is exempt from further environmental review pursuant to CEQA guidelines, Section 15332, and approving the architectural and site review permit AS 22-06, subject to the condition of having a barrier, screening, fence of some sort, at the minimum, chain link fence with slats.
At the aggregate base yard area?
Yes, at the aggregate base yard area.
And that was a condition in addition to the conditions in the resolution.
I second it.
Any discussion?
I just want to clarify, Vice Chair Kushner second, and so did Ellie go with, okay, Vice Chair Kushner.
All right. No further discussion? Roll call vote, please.
Commissioner Ellie?
Yes.
Commissioner Fugazi?
Yes.
Commissioner Leongard?
Yes.
Commissioner Lewis?
Yes.
Commissioner Ramirez?
Yes?
Vice Chair Kushner?
Yes.
Chair Bondal?
Yes. All right. That passes unanimously. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. On to new business. Ms. Jolie.
So is it on it now? Oh, good. I have to apologize. I made printouts for you, but they're so small. But I did 3 slides to screen some notes, but I'm looking at it and it is very small, so you can just take one and pass it there.
Sure.
Okay, so we've been talking about all sorts of trainings that we'll be doing coming up, and like just short trainings, not like 2-hour, 3-hour going through everything. And the purpose of tonight's training is to just give a very high overview of land use, like general plan, specific plan zonings. It might be a little too basic for everybody, but what we wanted to do was start with the basics. Because we will be coming in September, Sharon? Or Craig? Are we going? Oh, Craig's gone.
Yeah.
With the new zoning?
Yeah, September or October, just
Oh,
this
okay.
fall.
Yeah, it's sometime
That's
this
the plan.
fall. So there will be a new zoning code that you will be reviewing and making recommendations on. So we thought it would be good for you to learn and try to understand the hierarchy of the land use and the general plan, and just go through some of the very basics.
Is that county, or is that for the city of Gilroy, or is that county?
City,
For the city, the
Yes.
rezoning?
the whole new zoning code.
Oh, for the
It's
city.
it's an overhaul. It's all new. It's some is staying the same, some is changing, some stuff is moving around. So it is and we're trying to get it updated too with the general plan. So when you do a new general plan, you try to update your zoning to be consistent with your general plan. Years ago, the charter city didn't have to be consistent with the zoning, didn't have to be consistent with the general plan, but a few years ago, they changed that. So now everybody's got to be consistent. So, and I can tell you a little more history about the Gilroy zoning code. It used to be a standalone code. It was called the Gilroy zoning ordinance, and it was its own binder, separate from the city code. About, I don't know, it was when Shauna was here, so it was probably about 10 years ago, maybe. It got moved into the end of the city code, chapter 30. So now it is when we cite to it, it is a Gilroy code section. And what we did was we took the zoning ordinance and its numbers, and then we made it 30 point, chapter 30 point that, so we didn't have to renumber the whole thing. So, but it was a little bit different having new code sections. And so when we get the new zoning code, things are going to be moved around, and that we'll have new numbers for things, but I guess we'll all learn that. And so my presentation tonight, I'm not using any zoning code sections, because if I say, oh, variances are in 30.55 and use permits are in 30.46 or 86, it's not going to, it's all going to change. So that's where we are. So land use hierarchy, so you can start with the federal constitution and the federal laws, the state constitution, the charter, and then we've got the city general plan and the city's specific plans, the zoning code, then zoning amendments, and then what we call relief from the zoning code, which are CUPs and variances, and then you have subdivision maps, design review, and building permits. So the L means that those are legislative acts, and I will talk a little bit more about that. The Q means quasi-judicial or quasi-adjudicatory, and then the M is ministerial. So the building permits, they're ministerial, they're issued by the building inspector. They don't come to Planning Commission and they don't come to council. And if there's an appeal of those, they still don't come to Planning Commission and they don't come to council because the building official's decision is final and you would go to court if there was a decision. There are times when maybe some building permit requirements may be contested, and that's why we have a building board of appeals, and I don't remember even the last time they met. Do we still have them, right, Sharon?
Yes, but I don't think we have a quorum right now, as far as, the position.
Yeah, so
yeah, there is still yeah.
And they've only, but we do have them. We're required by law to have them. So you're not going to be challenging the building permit requirements, but maybe when someone that's a builder says, I don't think I want to use that material, I want to use a different material, they can appeal that. And I think we've only had a few appeals. So anyway, but the legislative, that's this general plan, specific plan, zoning amendments. Those all have to, they don't need findings, and I'll go into more detail. But they do have to promote the public health, safety, and welfare. And the quasi-judicial use permits, variances, subdivision maps, they're quasi-judicial. They will need findings for approval or for denial. And then design review, I put the little asterisks by it because with the new housing laws, design review and approvals and denials of certain multifamily projects the rules have changed. What we will be doing is after we do this basic training, we'll have one training just on new housing laws. So, and they're changing all the time. So just a heads up on that. So the city has what's called the police powers, and that's how we derive our powers. We derive
Can I just ask a question about the laws that are changing? You're referring to state laws, not federal, correct?
No, just the state laws.
The
SB 35s, the 330s, the SB 9s, the SB 6. So anyway, and so the police powers are derived from the California Constitution, and they're the source of power for the city to enact and enforce land use and zoning laws. And so how we do that is we do it through a local ordinance, a zoning ordinance, and it comes to you, and you recommend approval of it or denial of it to the city council. And as I've mentioned before, it has to be reasonably related to a legitimate government purpose, and that's public health, safety, and general welfare. This is where we get our drought regulations. This is where we get our, any of our code regulations. I mean, our whole zoning code has to promote the health, safety, and welfare. One thing it can't do is it can't conflict with federal or state constitutions, and it can't conflict with the state regarding matters of a statewide concern. That's the preemption, where the city, even though we're a charter city and we can have our local home rule and rule our things that are called municipal affairs, we can't overrule statewide concerns. And those are all the housing elements. And so when a housing law or a law that's passed by the state and they want it to apply to a charter city, it says this is a statewide concern and it applies to counties, charter counties, cities, charter cities. And so over the years there's been laws that have passed and they don't specifically say it applies to a charter city. So you can say, oh, well, it doesn't apply to us, and try to pass laws. And sometimes the cities win and sometimes the cities don't. It's not really in your area, but prevailing wage was going back and forth. Did it apply to charter cities or not? The payment of prevailing wage. Then there was some case law that said it could, if the city had, if it applied to a city project that was some sort of a city municipal affair, they could be preempted from paying prevailing wage. But then, of course, the statutes changed and we all got SB 7. And so we have to pay prevailing wage on certain projects. So we had to pass an ordinance, our SB 7 ordinance, and to be, so the state wouldn't come after us. So anyway, it's just these laws are becoming more and more preemptive. And the housing laws are very preemptive of what the local concerns are. So ADU laws are another source of those laws that we've been preempted. And, just the other night at council, we were trying to do a food vending ordinance. And there's state regulations about that what we can do and what we can't do. So anyway, so that's the source of the local police power. I'll move on. So the general plan, we just passed one, the 2040, and that's why we're updating our zoning. And the Gilroy's general plan includes 9 elements. The state law requires at least 7, and those are the elements. And the city council adopts the general plan by resolution. And it's interesting, the statute that says it can be adopted by resolution, it specifically says it has to be a majority of the full council. And it's interesting that they said that. So if 7 people, 4 will have to adopt it. If it's a 5-member council, then it would be 3. But it specifically states in there. So if people are absent, you're still going to have to get, 4 of the council members to approve it. And then there's the consistency. You heard Craig talk about that tonight. So consistency with the general plan is for all zoning and land use approvals. Tentative maps will need to be consistent with the general plan as well. And consistency requires compatibility. And as the courts say, it's not rigid conformity with every detail. So you can imagine you've got all these elements and they have goals and they have policies and implementation. And so it would be really unreasonable to think that you have to be consistent with all of them, because with the general plan you have to be able to have some flexibility, and you just need to be compatible with the land use element for certain planning projects or housing projects. But then public facilities and services, that would be more of the public works projects, that they would need to be consistent with the general plan. Like how we just reviewed the CIP to be consistent with the general plan. So they have to be consistent with certain of those elements. So anyway, there's general plan implementation, and those are through goals, policies, and implementation principles. And I have an example here, and this is from the new general plan. So there's the goal, the land use one. That's hard to see. And then the policy is access to open space. And then there is the implementation of that land use goal and that land use implementation 1.7. So that shows you, here's the overarching goal, here's the policies, and then here's the implementation, and it says what we will be doing to implement that general plan goal. Any questions on that? So specific plans. So you've got the general plan, and then you can have a specific plan under the general plan. And that's for comprehensive zoning. Some cities do a very detailed specific plan that also includes specific zoning. So it's, and we have it, I believe, in the Hecker Pass specific plan. It's very specific, and it has all the uses, like the tourist economy, the ag tourism, what type of housing, what kind of open space. It's very specific, and what uses will need a use permit and what uses are allowed by right. So that Hecker Pass specific plan is very comprehensive, and so that's what you need to comply with. Some cities can do just a specific plan, and then they adopt specific plan zoning that's separate. But some of them, they're included. So, but Hecker Pass is an example of how it's all included. So the specific plan, again, must be consistent with the general plan. And projects within the specific plan have to be consistent. So, and I gave you some examples. Hecker Pass, Glen Loma, and then we have the downtown specific plan. So, and I think those are all of our specific plans. I think there might be the downtown specific plan has the historic district in it, yeah. So, so zoning, the purpose for zoning way back when is it was developed to avoid land use conflicts, not put, industrial next to housing, not put pig farms next to housing, and try to put industrial uses in some areas and housing in other areas, because before they had zoning, you could build or do whatever you wanted. I think some states still have that. They don't have zoning, so you can have. Yeah, I was going to say I didn't want to call out Houston, but I think Houston, Texas doesn't have specific zoning. It's the wild, wild west out there, I guess. Yeah. So it divides cities into districts or zones, and so those zones are going to be, commercial, residential, or industrial, and then even the residential can be broken down into further districts, like R1 or R3, and then there's commercial, there's industrial commercial, neighborhood commercial, heavy industrial, light industrial. So those are the zoning districts that then can still be defined even further, and they give the height, the densities, the setbacks, and all of that. So relief from zoning, it can be through zoning amendments, conditional use permits, or variances, and I will get into those. So rezonings, we've done rezonings here, and that's classifying the zoning from one parcel and changing it to another zoning district. So that's through a zoning amendment. And so zoning amendments will apply to a district, and then it would apply to all the parcels in that district. So if you had a commercial district and you wanted to rezone it to neighborhood commercial, it would, that whole blue area on the map might turn green or something like that. So then you can also have like zonings that just apply from one parcel to another parcel, and we do that, I would say, when we do R3 to R3 PD. That's a specific rezoning of that parcel, and it's just changing the density there. It's legislative, needs to further health safety, and the rules about zoning is it can't be arbitrary, it can't be discriminatory, and it really doesn't need findings because the zoning ordinance should say how it furthers the health and safety. You can deny, the interesting thing is you can deny zoning without findings. You can just deny it or you can approve it. But usually the zoning ordinance has how it meets the health and safety. But unlike some of the things we'll talk further, you don't need specific findings to deny or approve a zoning. And
Jolie, I
then,
had a question for conditional use permits. I know once CUPs get approved, they stay with the land, correct? Do they ever expire or?
No, not, and I'll get to that. Yeah,
Okay.
they run with the land. That's what it's called. But there can be arbitrary or discriminatory zonings, but there's old cases about it. Sometimes people accuse the local agency of spot zoning when they change the zoning of one parcel when everybody else is a different use, and but that doesn't really happen that much anymore. So conditional use permits. So here, they're uses that are permissible subject to the approval of the Planning Commission. And what is distinguishable, that there's uses that meet the zoning and they're permissive as of right, but a conditional use permit is it's not allowed as of right, but it's allowed with certain conditions. It requires general plan consistency, and usually it's like a use that's within a neighborhood or a certain district, and you want to make sure that all the impacts have been addressed. So it's not allowed by right, but with a use permit, you can mitigate or add conditions for traffic, noise, hour of operations. There's a special CUP process for the downtown projects. There's the downtown dance halls and breweries, and they all have special use permits, which are specific for those uses to alleviate any noise or congestion. And use permits are quasi-judicial, and they allow for imposition of conditions. They run with the land, not the landowner. And they should not expire. Many times an agency can say that in 5 years we want to have it come back and see if there's been some changes.
The reason I ask that, because I've seen it a few times where they will expire if there's not a consistently running business permit with it. So if somebody fails to update their business permit with the city and it expires, then the conditional use.
Yeah, but really what I know, if you get a use permit and you don't act on it and you don't vest it, you don't do the use that was granted in the use permit, they will expire after 2 years. But if you have a use permit and the local agency says, oh, well, you've abandoned the use and you haven't used it, they usually have a safety valve kind of code section that says you can come back and try to prove up your use. And in my private practice, I've done that before. Like there was a retreat center, and it had camps, and it was up in the mountains, and it had and the county said, oh, well, your use permit has lapsed. You haven't done this use for 6 months or more. But I helped the applicant go back and look at records and say, no, they had a retreat held there within the 6-month time. They were still doing office uses for the camps. So it wasn't maybe as active as it was, but it was still being used. And it was just a prove ups, and the county accepted that. But you should, people should be careful. And this person, this company, they were in escrow, so it was, they were going to buy something, and then the county said, oh, no, your use permit has lapsed, and they thought they were buying a retreat center and school and camp center. But anyway, so the one thing about use permits, they do run with the land, not the landowner. I can give some, an example of a case I worked on where in a neighboring city, there was a Swenson's ice cream, and it had a use permit, and it was allowed, and then they were selling it, and Cold Stone Creamery was going to come in and take over that use. And the Planning Commission decided that Cold Stone Creamery didn't meet the general plan, and they wanted to deny their use permit. So then it got appealed to the town council, and, it was, how can Swenson's meet the general plan and the downtown economic policies of the general plan when, Swenson's can't, or Cold Stone Creamery can't. They wanted Swenson's, not Cold Stone Creamery, because they thought that was a big franchise that was going to cause all sorts of problems. But anyway, it was a retail use. It was an ice cream vendor shop, and and it doesn't matter who owns it. So that's kind of the point I'm trying to say there. Use permits are a lot of times. What?
I have a question. So, would you see this? Do you see this, or how would it work if, in your example with the Swenson's versus the Cold Stone, let's say I owned the property, but I was renting it to someone else who then had the business? How would that? Would I have, as the property owner, would I have to go in on behalf of the business? You understand my question?
Yeah. So it runs with the property, and so the property owner would get the use permit, or they would have their tenant go in and get the use for the ice cream place. But on the application, it would say the property owner consents to this use, because you are putting a use on their property that you can't just wipe away. You could rescind it, but usually applications, the property owner needs to sign an affidavit that they're allowing someone to come in and change their use or something. But
So
yeah.
it can be changed. So if, let's say, it was Swenson's and then business wasn't that good, whatever, and I'm still the owner of the building, and gosh, I don't know, a boutique or a...
It would have to be a similar retail type use, probably a food establishment. It couldn't turn into it would have to be something similar, or if you didn't want to use the use permit for that type of use, you could do something that was allowed by right. Like, let's say a restaurant was, I'd say, a restaurant, not a specific retail use like a ice cream shop. So
Couldn't you just apply for a new
a new
COP?
use, yeah, a new use
okay,
permit,
okay.
yeah.
Yeah.
You
So
could always
it would
do that, yeah.
supersede whatever was there before. You
Yeah.
just have to go through the
So
application
the use
process.
permit would be the retail restaurant use wasn't allowed by right in that district. So you needed the use permit because of, maybe traffic or how many, the parking or something. But if you could do something that was allowed by right, you could just ignore that use permit. You wouldn't have to get rid of it. You could just ignore it. But you usually see CUPs with churches, daycares, and schools in residential areas. That's where you can see them a lot. Okay. So then variances, those are they're a relief from the strict application of the zoning, pertains to that property. But a use variance would be, you need a rezoning. Variances, they need special circumstances that really are tied to the physical characteristic of the property. Like your property, everybody's got a real nice, square or rectangular property, and then you're on the corner and you're sort of a pie shape. And so trying to build your house or put your pool in or something, you can't meet all those setbacks. So it's actually the size and shape of your property and the zoning that's applied in that district is sort of a burden to you, and you can show that there's special circumstances, and it is creating an undue hardship. And it isn't going to give you a special benefit because you just want the benefit to be able to develop your property like your neighbors, but you just have an odd-shaped property. The one thing that comes up all the time is they can't be granted or approved because other variances have been approved. I don't know, Joni, if you were around when they were doing the freeway-oriented signs along by the outlets, the big tall ones. So for a while there, everybody was getting a variance, so for their highway sign. Yeah, and so then everybody wanted one, and it was getting to the point where the staff looked at just redoing the zoning, because if everybody's asking for a variance, there's something wrong with the zoning. It needs to be fixed. But a lot of times applicants will say, oh, well, you gave this person a variance for their sign, and so I should get a variance. But that's not really how it works. It has to be, something really specific and tied to your property. But they're hard to meet. They're hard to grant because you really should show that it's something specific about the property. Okay, I wanted to move on. So this slide is design review, and you do ArcInsight review. You had one tonight, and it was for a commercial industrial type site, and you can impose certain conditions. Design guidelines will state what kind of conditions you can add. And so they're in the city code, and then there's also specific requirements and findings for planned unit developments under the current code. Subjective design regulations have been severely limited by the state for certain housing projects. And so I don't want to get into Housing Accountability Act or SB 9. The city did adopt objective standards for housing development projects, which is defined by the state laws. But we'll go into more detail about that, because denying a housing development project, and I keep using those words because that means something. It means that it is so many units, and it has so many affordable units, and it has this and that. Or you can't really deny it on subjective standards. You'd have to show, health and safety concerns that can't be mitigated. I call those super findings, but I think Sharon can correct me. I don't know if we're coming back in August or we're coming in September with housing laws. But I'm just trying to give you an FYI. If I started to go into all the housing laws right now, we'd be here another hour or two. I mean, yeah.
Just when we come back with that topic, could you be more specific and define what's regarding the dangers and the restriction regarding safety and those kind of things, like with specific points and getting to that safety and health, for example?
Well, yeah, so for denying something under Housing Accountability Act, for example, it has to be an objective standard, and it has to be adopted when the project was submitted. And it means that, and then if you're going to try to deny it, it has to have an adverse impact on public, on health or safety. And those impacts can't be mitigated. So it's a very high standard. And if you're going to say it's a health concern or a safety concern, those regulations have to be already adopted and applied to that. You can't, the days of doing a study after the fact to prove up how you're going to deny a project, you can't do that. So it's there. Everything needs to be in place at the time of the application, or you can't apply it later. So,
So we were saying that if they apply, that means we have to accept it, but you were not part of it, the application part of it. Is that correct?
no, they will submit an app. We'll go into this later, but they can submit an application, and if the Planning Commission or the Council wants to deny it, they have to deny it based on specific health and safety impacts that are objective and that have been in place at the time of their application, and there's no feasible way of mitigating them. So
you basically cannot say, like there were a couple of comments today on the project that we approved, saying thank you, for making it look kind of nice, right? So what you're saying is anything like an affordable housing unit, we cannot deny. It can be as blatantly ugly, bland, whatever, colors, whatever, and because there's no health, safety, we cannot deny it.
It has to be objective, yes. And so
so the state is saying you need to accept whatever they propose in that regard.
if it meets if it is the qualified housing development project.
But we could make a condition that they change the colors, right?
Well,
No?
no.
No?
They meet and the other thing is you can't deny or have conditions that reduce the density.
Okay, but changing the colors wouldn't reduce the density.
Well,
but you can't
yeah,
do
deny
that because you cannot ask them to do that because it does not impact the safety and the
We
health.
can ask, right? We can ask for them to change.
They just don't have to.
Yeah, they don't have
Yeah,
to,
they don't
but
have
we
to.
can ask.
Right.
And the other thing too, but when you say like impact regarding health and safety, and that's where I think is the problem is, like, I think we need a better understanding what that means, because for me, if there is like 200 units and there is like just one gate, that's that's a safety issue, but I don't know the specifics,
Well,
right?
yeah.
So but when time comes, we don't have to talk about right now. But the only my request is, can you guys work more in like give more examples or just kind of load us with information. What that means.
Because if they come in and they're a qualified housing development project, and they also, let's say they're getting density bonus too. They can get an extra story over your height limitation, and you can't deny that. They can get reduced setbacks. You can't deny because of that. Some projects, and you don't want to hear this, but some projects, if they qualify, can provide zero parking. And so so that's why we're not doing this tonight, because you just have all these, you can't, and it's hard because when you do that, because I've been doing that training other places, it's hard to do it because I have to sit here, or Andy will sit here, and we have to say, no, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that. And it gets very, very frustrating because people are used to having so much discretion.
But I think Adriana brings up a good point in terms of, so that we have a better understanding as a planning commission as to what are safety concerns. She brings up a good point in terms of, if they have, X amount of units and then they got the bonus units because they qualified, and, it's gated for some reason or whatever, and, is it a safety hazard getting people out or,
Yes,
something like that?
yes.
So just some
Yeah,
kind
those
of
things, yeah, that would be
guideline as to
good, yeah.
what qualifies as a safety hazard or a health hazard or something. I think that
Yeah.
that would be helpful to us so that we know what to look for or what could be something that we
Yeah,
could
we haven't
deny.
had, we really haven't had too many Housing Accountability Act
Because
projects.
my question,
No, most of these things, the ones that you were describing, don't even come to the planning commission because
Yeah.
they're ministerial review, right? As far as
No, some of them would be coming to the Planning Commission. I don't know under the new zoning code, but a multifamily housing project of 100 or 150 units would come to you. And we have had a couple Housing Accountability Act cases where.
but for example, if regarding, let's say, it's that there's a certain amount of fire extinguishers or sprinklers, like in case of a fire, those kind of things, those kind of information, it's good for us to know because that's a healthy issue.
Well, they still have to meet fire code and building code.
Right. By the time so even the ones that do come to the planning commission, they have already been checked off against all the requirements for health
Yeah,
and
the
safety
TAC,
at the staff level.
the technical advisory
Yeah.
committee and the fire department will review it for turnarounds and how they're going to get
But
to.
even if they increase, they come over here and they increase the units, for example, and then they have to go back and adjust that portion of the work. Like, let's say, instead of build like 30 units, you're going to build 40. Like, do they have to, but let's say 40 units doesn't require fire extinguishing only inside of the house, but let's say some kind of fire protector outside, so they, because more units, the standards, gets higher regarding safety, so that's what I'm talking
Yeah,
about.
well, we can talk about that later, but it will, before it ever gets to you, it will go through, fire, police, planning, public works. They'll make sure that the project as proposed, we can still make them abide by all of our building codes. And
Some
our
of those
fire
are
codes.
aesthetic, too, and ministerially enforced, right? So it's not a complete wild, wild west, right? So there's...
No, but yeah, I mean, you can, the problem, and we're getting into this too much, but the problem is if it's a big boxy building and you say, we want you to step it back, well, guess what? You're reducing density. You're making units on that second floor and that third floor smaller maybe, and the applicant will say, no, you can't do that.
But aesthetically, they have to comply still with the surrounding area in the ministerial process.
Well, they have to comply with our objective standards.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah, so, but.
Which has to be interpreted by staff.
Yeah,
And
but-
that's my question, that this is all about really, in these sorts of situations, is that it's the trust of the project of staff, and staff is sort of that liaison between the developer and the city to make sure, we see what comes before us, and we get an inkling of the conversations that they have had, and I would imagine that they are very impactful in negotiating and discussing and having developers make changes so that, they meet the requirements, whether they're legally requirements or not, of our city. So, that's...
Yeah, and what it is, where it really will, and we don't really do that here, but let's say you had a 30-unit condo project near downtown or something, and you didn't think that it fit into downtown. It didn't have the downtown look and feel. Years ago, you could deny it and send it back for redesign, but it is providing housing, and it is going to be protected by the new housing laws. And so denying it because you think it's ugly or it's too big, or it's not in character with the
Yeah.
city, you can't do that anymore.
Oh, no anymore? Like,
If it's a
like cultural inherited or something like that, used to be something like this, right? If it doesn't fit with that, like that area, you could deny that.
Well, it really depends, and when they qualify as a housing development project and you throw in density bonus and they want waivers and concessions, they can get more height, less setbacks, and they can get an extra floor or more and reduce, frontage and less parking, and, it's hard to comprehend, but now it's the new way. I mean, I used to litigate land use cases, and it would always be, Your Honor, it's the city's discretion, it's our zoning, it's our general plan, we get the deference to interpret it. Well, you can't say that anymore. The deference has been taken away, and it is now, it's now become objective, and because too many cities were abusing it. And so, and that and the need for housing. So, I used to, I would always say, well, it's, for anything but housing, you can still say it's our zoning or it's our code and we get to interpret it because we created it, but not with housing. And it's, the burden has been shifted to the local agency. We don't make the developer approve the incentives or concessions or waivers are needed for the affordability. The city has to prove that it doesn't. So, it's a whole different playing field. So that's why we're going to have a whole nother.
Is that a way we can kind of request the city to review the infrastructure? For example, you know how we need to have certain amount of available lands or like, I don't know, go by acres or whatever that is, by like bus station. And then, but let's say if we exhaust that option because we're now giving, showing land that is not really available, like people own them, like some of them the city owns, and like doesn't mean it's available for construction. So we kind of like exhaust that area, right? Can we somehow request this, or the city or the staff, like to make, let's say, to add another, let's say, bus line? Or how does that work? Like,
if you think that the project is causing a traffic or a demand, a circulation or traffic demand.
And we cannot deny that project, for example. But can we go, instead of asking the builder to also ask something that the builder doesn't have to do it, can we go back and say, okay, let's go ask the city to like add another bus line or some kind of like infrastructure that we feel it's needed?
Well, that would be done through traffic engineering, and they would, if there's a need for a traffic signal, a stop sign, or more bus lanes, the traffic engineers, but then that is all going to go through VTA, which we don't control that. I mean, they control the buses. And so, but I know, like tonight, the project, Craig said that it didn't qualify for a Transportation Demand Management Plan, a TDM. And he says, but VTA reviewed our project and didn't have comments. So when these projects come through, we send them out to the Water District, to VTA, and so they get to chime in. And if they thought, oh, this project is the one project that tips the scales, and maybe you need to do a Transportation Demand Management Plan or figure out how this traffic is going to work. So, but like a bus lane, we wouldn't be doing that.
well, it could be any kind of structure. This was just example. So is that we request as a planning commission to the city, or what's the process? Like, who decides, like, oh, we need more infrastructure. It could, whatever that means.
That would be through engineering and public works and CIP projects. And, they determine when streets need to be repaired. They determine when a new well needs to go in or when a bridge needs to be put in and stuff like that, like the Hecker Pass or the Glen Loma area out there. There's a bridge that's supposed to be put in
we
there.
We cannot deny a project, but can we ask them what you said was the affair or something, like, I don't remember the department you mentioned that's responsible for that.
For VTA?
No, the other one. Public affair or something?
Public Works?
Public Works, yes. So can we ask, okay, can we do that first? Can we put it on hold, the project?
No.
Or can we, no?
No, there's strict timelines too about when the applications are submitted, and these applications, a lot of them, they have limited CEQA review, so you can't pull out the CEQA card on some of these as well. So I know I hate giving these presentations, and everybody they feel so frustrated and they get so mad. But it just takes a little time of just getting used to the new norm.
So
maybe that's a better conversation to have after we discuss all the new housing laws next time.
So we'll have therapy afterwards. Yes.
So you mentioned, the lack of the requirement of CEQA has diminished, all of that kind of stuff. I don't have my notes in front of me, but when I was down south at the planning commissioner training, if I recall correctly, there was something to do with certain projects not even needing to go through the approval process itself. It wouldn't even come to us.
We can still do CEQA, like for SB 330 CEQA, you still have to do CEQA, so it won't, like the builder's remedy, you won't get, maybe with a builder's remedy, you can pull out CEQA and say you didn't analyze this, but I think you're thinking about SB 35. It's ministerial. They submit an application, they check all the boxes, they pay their fee, and it doesn't go to planning commission. Or council. It just goes to the building department for plan check to make sure it meets the building codes.
And also, we just did the re-identified housing. Anything that was on the list twice, also we won't see. So if they wanted to do a certain type of building on that property, then we wouldn't see that either. It would go right through.
Yeah, and we haven't had any SB 35 projects here, but it doesn't mean you won't. Anyway, I'm gonna move on. This is why I was like, I'm just gonna tell you, because once you start talking about this, it's a whole nother hour. These are the new laws, and we kind of went through all of this, and training will be done. And we're going to, Housing Accountability Act has been out since '89, I think. Density bonus, 85 maybe. But SB 35, that's the one that's very ministerial. You check all the boxes, you pass go, you don't go to planning commission, you don't go to council. And if you deny it, you'll get sued and you'll lose. And then there's SB 330 that has specific time periods on it and what gets vested at the time they submit their application. And then there's SB 9, which is the lot split. And how many things can you put on 2 parcels? Let's count. Is it 4 or is it 6? Okay, Subdivision Map Act. So it is the legal mechanism to divide a parcel into multiple parcels for the purpose of sale, lease, or financing. And years ago, before the MAP Act, people could deed parts of their land off and for sale, and to make subdivisions and zoning and everything consistent, the MAP Act came about. So you would create parcels for orderly development, and you would, and then you could sell them. You'd have a final map, and then you could sell off the lots. So 4 or fewer parcels require a parcel map. Parcel maps don't come to Planning Commission, right? Sharon, they don't come to Planning Commission. Parcel.
I think it
Do
does.
have we had a
Wasn't
parcel?
the hotel and the gas station project out on by Target was
It was a parcel map?
it was a parcel map?
And
Or-
I think we also had the housing near you also was a parcel map.
No, okay.
Yeah,
I,
yeah, good.
maybe under, okay, all right. So then, but for 5 or more, it needs a tentative map and a final map. And so the tentative map, you've seen those before, and they have all the conditions. And these are tentative map conditions of approval, and they must be satisfied before you can get a final map. So by the time a project has a final map, it goes to the city council. It doesn't come back to you. It goes to the city council. And then it is approved if the final map substantially complies with the tentative map. And a lot of times, these subdivisions, if they're big enough, they have off-site improvements, they need to put a bridge in, they need to widen a road, they need to do some infrastructure. So they can get a final map, what they do is they enter into a subdivision improvement agreement with the city, which is a contract to make them, bond and provide for a timeline of when these improvements are going to get done. But the developer wants a final map so they can do construction loans, they can start grading, they can start developing the project. But the subdivision improvement agreement will make sure that we get all those conditions met. So it's a contract at that point. It's a map condition, but then it becomes a contractual arrangement with the developer, and they'll bond and for those improvements.
So I'm sorry, who monitors to ensure those improvements are done after the approval?
It's usually through Public Works.
Okay. And then I had a quick question. I've had several, our planning department is amazing. They've been so helpful in guiding us. I've had several say that, Planning Commission and/or council, depending on both or one seeing these, this is the discretionary time to ensure that everything is met. That these votes, once the maps have been approved and everything, then all discretionary is gone. All discretion is gone.
Once the map's final and the city council, usually when it goes to council for the final map, the first action is the council approves the subdivision improvement agreement or the property improvement agreement. I think here they're PIA's property improvement agreement. And then they approve the map. The map can get recorded, and then that map is done. But the PIA will ensure that those improvements are done. But the conditions that you can put on a map are not like architect and site. They're the roadways. There's where the sidewalks go. There's
what happens
open
if those
space.
improvements aren't completed? And the map is approved and those improvements don't get completed? What happens then?
Well, the city can call the bonds, or there's remedies that the city can do, yeah. But the tentative map is, as I say, it's the one that draws the lines on the ground, and it shows where the roads are going to go, where parks are going to go, where street and access. And it's really, by law and by the Gilroy Code, you approve, you review and make recommendations on a tentative map. but it's usually handled through planning staff, and Public Works has a big role in maps. It's really a Public Works. There's time limits for the Planning Commission to act on a tentative map, and if it goes to the Planning Commission and you don't act on it, it can be deemed approved. And then there's a bunch of catches that you don't.
Who deemed that? Who can deem that, even though it's not?
Well, if a tentative map came to the Planning Commission and you continued it a couple of times, the developer could come in and say, the Planning Commission didn't act on it in the time period, and I'm going to say that it's deemed complete, approved. And so but that rarely happens, and there's the catch-all to that one is if it has CEQA, the time period doesn't start running until the CEQA. So if we've ever had a map or something and you want to continue it, I'm always telling you, don't act on the neg deck, don't act on the environmental, because I don't want to trigger that. So that's always in the back of my head is those time periods.
Who does the checks and balance for Public Works?
The engineers, the city engineer. What do you mean?
I mean, because it seems like that Public Works, they take care of like a lot of aspects of the project, but then it just take like, let's say, a person to like kind of make a mistake and approve something. Like, is there any check and balance? Like, is there any? Can we go back and say, okay, this is not right? Like, or
Well, I don't know what the Planning Commission would say about something not being right, because, see, the Public Works, when they're approving a map and they're looking at, they look at all sorts of things, but, the roads are going to have to be to a certain spec, and the lot sizes are going to have to comply with the zoning lot size, and unless it's a PD, and then they can have smaller lots and smaller roads and stuff like that. But it's really Public Works and Planning that would make sure that they're meeting everything.
But there's like, there are laws that it's not there. It's up to, it's not preference even, like, but there are things that is not on the specs, like is not described. I'll give an example. We had a building that was very close to like a preserve, and then we like kind of over here like fighting, trying to come up with something that like in case of a fire, that is this people be protected, and vice versa, even the environment, because if the fire starts on this side, it will be more difficult to cross to the preserve the area. But this is not really clear, doesn't even have anything like that. So it's kind of like, they have to make a decision, but there is no really like a base. It's not like, the road has to be like 10 foot, wide. It's not like that's not that specific. So there are things that's, I guess it's like up to interpretation or whatever they decide like to approve.
Well, Public Works and deciding about roads and widths of roads, it's all in our street plan. We have a street master plan. What is an arterial? What's a local? What's a, and we have. And all of those roads have certain specification and
not talking about the roads. It's the opposite of a road. Something that's like it's not even there. Like, for example, the example that I gave you is, like it had a 2-story building, like that's just by the preserve and that with no wall protection barrier. Like, this is not, it's not there, right? It's not perfect. It's not complete, right?
Wouldn't the fire department and public
Yeah,
safety and all that stuff have to have some kind of
look at all
code
that
and
stuff,
criteria?
Yeah, but then there was nothing.
Was it a project here in
think
town?
I think she's talking about a project from a long time ago, and it wasn't even our property, and it was the Water District property,
Yes.
and you can't do anything about it because it was Water District property, and that project met all the fire safety, and it complied, and what was happening on the Water District property was something that was out of this city's control, and it was not part of the project.
So that's the problem. I didn't see any fire safety, anything. It was not even mentioned like, oh, we have sprinklers, we have extinguishers, we have like a route, like in case if like distinct, but it was like a zero fire protection.
It went,
kind of.
all these projects go through the fire department, and the fire department reviews, and they're aware of what happens if there's a fire and where the fire trucks go and where people leave and all of that. So anyway, we've got to move on here. So judicial reviewed legislative acts, they're usually upheld if it's reasonably related to a legitimate state interest. I'm saying that's a low bar, but they are subject to initiative and referendum. And then quasi-judicial acts, that's the regulations like that, the application of variance, CUP, design review. They must be based on findings supported by substantial evidence in the record, and it's a higher bar. They're not subject to referendum. And they require, protected procedures, due process, fair hearing. Zoning, you just need to have a public hearing, and that's it. But for these quasi-judicial acts, it's a public hearing. You have to allow the public to speak on it. You have to be making sure that your decision's based on findings, and that those findings are based on evidence in the record. And here you need to be aware of common law bias to afford a fair hearing. This is when ex parte communications come in, because if you you want to base your decision on what you've heard from the public, what's in the staff report, what is said in here, which is all part of the administrative record. If you've had communications with neighbors or the applicant, and it's something that may not be reflected in the staff report or in the discussion, and it has bearing on your decision, that's an ex parte communication. And you need to let your fellow planning commissioners know, the public needs to know, everybody needs to know, because it affects your decision. And that's just to make sure that it's a fair hearing. You don't want to be making a decision based on some sort of secret information that no one else knows. So, but you can have communications with the neighbors and the applicant, and you can disclose it or not. But when you really need to disclose it is, hey, I learned something. I went out to the site and I learned that, and this isn't in the staff report. I learned that there's something out there that I'm concerned about, or the neighbors. I talked to the neighbors and they raise these issues. So you want to bring it up so at least staff can answer it or the applicant can answer it, but you don't want it to affect your decision without everybody else knowing about it. So you need to come to the hearing with an open mind, no pre-commitment. And, and a common law bias is different than a FPPC conflict. That's a financial conflict. This other conflict is you can have project bias. You just don't like that project, or you might have applicant bias. You have personal animosity to that applicant. You may, there's other ways of having an animus to a project, but if you really feel like you cannot take in all the evidence, listen to your fellow planning commissioners, listen to the public, maybe both sides of the public, if it's controversial, and weigh and balance all that and make a fair determination. If you are so pre-committed, it may be one of those cases where you don't participate at all if you cannot give that person a fair hearing. And that's very rare. I know sometimes people have said, I'm not really, I've spoken against certain projects like this, but I want to hear from the applicant, I want to hear from the public, and I want to hear everything, and I will be fair and make the decision based on the evidence in the record. So that is it. And as I said, we will be coming back. Sharon, when will be coming back about the housing? I know Andy wants to do it too. So
Yes, I think we're looking at September.
September?
Yes.
Oh, okay. And then, and we'll for those, health and safety impacts that can't be mitigated, we'll try to come up with some, but it's I hate to say it, but it's really hard to come up with some.
I have a question.
Yeah.
So I was looking at the zoning map, and I noticed all the zoning maps I could find, and this might be a question for Sharon, showed the urban growth boundary and then the zoning within that. What is the zoning outside of the urban growth boundary? Is that county? And if county, like what zone is it? Is it agriculture?
It's county. And so it's...
So how do I find the zoning for the county, or like how does that work?
County planning.
County zoning maps, and then there's land that's in the urban service area, and then there's... and if it's county, it's going to be the urban county, and it's probably going to be some sort of ag.
Okay, I looked, I couldn't find it, so I just wasn't sure, I'll look again.
Yes.
But, okay, thank you.
And then there's rules about if you're you're adjacent to the city, and you're in the county, and you want to develop in the city, the county has land use goals and policies and implementation themselves, and so you will have to be annexed. And when the city will take you in, unless the city says, no, we don't want you, and you can develop in the county. But the cities, Saratoga, Los Gatos, all those where the people are annexing into the city, those cities usually say, yes, we want you to annex in, because then all their codes and regulation and design review and everything apply. They rarely say no. And then there's all sorts of rules. And if you're on a road and you want to annex in, sometimes they make the city take part of the road, and the cities don't want to take the roads because they're not kept to our standards.
So follow up to that question. So let's just say there's a ranch, because I'm making this up as I go, because I don't know if this is going to be a great example. So let's say there's a ranch and they want to build something. They're outside of the urban growth boundary. So would they send their plans, but they're in Gilroy, if their address is Gilroy. Since they're in county, would they then send their barn plans or their ranch plans or whatever their plans are to the county?
Yes.
Or to Gilroy?
They would be the county.
Oh, okay.
But and you have to, there's so many rules about the county and the urban service area, and if you're not within an urban service area, it's going to be,
You have Greenbelt and you have LAFCO.
Yeah, you've got all sorts
You
of...
have, because of county land, so I know.
you've got
And
a
then
lot of things before you can develop in the county.
What about the state mandating things in the county areas? Are they having the same type of state control versus local control
Yeah, they
at that
are,
level?
but they don't have the type of development cities do. And, but they're subject to all the ADU laws.
Okay, so they are somewhat impacted. Okay.
Yeah, and they're subject to, I would say mostly ADUs or, I don't know if anyone's going to do to do an SB 35 project. If you look at that checklist, it's really hard to meet all those requirements. Like if you're adjacent to this or adjacent to that, or you're, yeah.
If a project come over and let's say it came, like, we're supposed to approve like 30 units, 15 on the first floor, 15 on the second floor, but then there is 5 parking. Can we ask to, let's say, can we ask it to put in like one more floor, so make 3 floors instead of 2, and it's still going to have like the same amount of units, but it's going to have more parking? Can we ask basically to review to review the drawings, right, the plan, because
You
it's a
can't
two-story-
make them put in parking if
But-
it's
but-
going
but-
to
but-
make the project infeasible for the, if they're providing a certain percentage of affordable housing, you will not be able to make them put in that floor of parking, because they can come back and say that condition is either reducing the density or making the project infeasible.
But the-
Infeasible for providing housing. So anything the city, the local agency, planning commission, council, staff people, if anything is seen as an impediment to housing or is making the housing infeasible, and it's not even affordable housing anymore, it's just housing.
But if they say that actually it would cost, probably going to cost less, let's say, instead of, again, two-story units, we're going to make it 3 stories, but you're going to have more parking. Because it could be cheaper, because you don't have to, to build like in a lower floor, it costs more than up, let's say. So can we even propose that? Okay, can you make 3 floors but more parking? Can we even propose? And then they say, oh, maybe that's a possibility. Can we propose that to them?
Do you mean like parking underneath, like just lift it up one and then have the parking on the first level?
Let's say we have an area and we have 30 units. First floor and
I see
15
what you're
on the
saying.
first floor, 15 on the second floor. It's actually cheaper to build above. It is cheaper to build above than to build below. So can we propose to make like less units, to make one more floor? Just propose anything. I'm just give an example. Could be anything. Can we make a proposition and then they said, okay, this is a possibility or not, this could work or not? Is that possible to even make a proposition for them to change their design?
You could request, but you can't deny it.
Okay.
I mean, and there's so many, in the case law, and there's so many nuances to these housing laws, like there's case law on that you have concessions and incentives and waivers, and you say, well, if you got rid of that interior courtyard, you could put more units there. And they say, no, you can't redesign our project and strip our project of amenities.
Oh, okay.
So,
but you can propose, though.
well,
you cannot, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't like it if people are asking the developer to do something that we all know that they can't. They can say no, or you can't impose it. So it's kind of a fine line, like, we can't do this, but we want to ask you anyway. So, but we'll talk about all these laws, and it's very interesting. And we don't get a lot of the affordable housing type projects. We don't really face density bonus. We have neighborhood commercial that has an affordability component, and then we'll be coming with an inclusionary zoning, won't we?
Yes.
Gilroy doesn't have inclusionary zoning, and it's one of the few cities, I think, around. It is when you have a housing project of 10 units or something or more, 10% needs to be affordable, or 20%.
Basically, you could consider like affordable housing ordinance. You can develop the threshold, whether it's 5 units or 10 units, and then above which, what percentage of units should be affordable,
It's a way of
and
us
what affordability
getting
level
affordable
that's all
units.
to be. develop.
And then you're not going to like this either. So you do your inclusionary.
Can you come up with things that solution, like, can you dig into it and like said, okay, we can do that because like the not do list is like, that's why you
I
have
know
like
you-
a city lawyer, so you can like, you know the, like how to go around, like how you know the laws and like,
How
that's
I go
what
around.
we need.
No, but what I was going to say is when we have an inclusionary zoning ordinance and it requires 20%, the developer can then ask for density bonus on top of that. And the 20% that's our inclusionary gets counted towards their density bonus. So you can't say, no, you have to satisfy inclusionary, and then you get to do, on top of that, we want to see another 10%. They say, no, the 20% of your ordinance counts, and then I'll add to that, and I'll get more density. But there was a mix years ago of the city's attorneys, we'd argue about this all the time. The inclusionary, was it then you had to do on top? But there was a case that said, no, your inclusionary counts towards density bonus, which resolved it for all of us, which...
So
yeah.
how does the
They get double.
builder's remedy figure into this?
The builder's remedy, that's a whole nother, that goes to the general plan and our housing element, and if it's a certified housing element yet, and...
Is that
Yeah, so
basically
you
that
will just-
when the city rejects a plan that the developer can insist that, well, but because it's for housing...
No, they can submit and
they can get
say,
around
they
that?
can submit and say, you don't have a certified housing element, therefore I can submit this plan and you can't deny it. So.
Can we-
But there's ways to deny it, and I don't really want to talk
Go into
about
that.
it because
Can
we've
we
got one.
include in the training also, let's say, cases where, let's say, the state sued the city, not necessarily Gilroy, it could be any city, and because the developer wants to include like certain amount of units, and it's like something that where the city win over the state somehow, like is that could include like some kind of like
Yeah, well-
successful cases,
Yes, yes.
you
Well,
know, like what they did, what's like the
you're
flip
looking
side.
at one of the few land use attorneys that won a Housing Accountability Act case for their city.
See?
Most of them lose, and you hear about all the ones that
Yeah,
lose.
yeah.
And I always want, like, how come they won't put my case there? Because I won one like
See,
many
that's
years
what we're
ago.
talking about.
But,
Please bring those over.
Yeah. Well, I was very pleased.
Now a lot of the laws have changed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
a lot of the newer laws,
but it
there
was-
haven't
But
been,
I mean, still
actual
there are some
cases.
cities out there who
Okay,
are
so she wants
Yeah.
success stories.
success stories,
Oh, well.
stories that
there's
we
lots
can
of-
fight against, like the abuse, because this is abuse of
Well.
like.
Well, those cities that are challenging RENA and the AG, and they're not being very successful. So I'm not putting a lot of, that's. But as a city attorney, what you want to do is make sure we don't get sued, and if we do get sued, we have a good record. And that's
Exactly.
What
So that's why you kind of have to prepare us, like the good, like what you can do to be prepared, like so then then we are
Well,
like.
if you're going to deny a map, you need to deny it on certain findings under the MAP Act, and even if you approve it, it needs those findings. But you can't just add a condition that is illegal, and you can't make them put in a sidewalk that goes beyond the frontage of their property, down a mile away or something. You've got to be reasonable with your conditions, or the city did get sued on a sidewalk that was too much, and it got sued, but the city settled it. So everybody wanted the sidewalk to go too far, and it was like, you can't do that. So
Thank you, Jolene.
anyway,
We appreciate
yeah,
it. We look forward to the next
I told you
training.
I wanted this to be short, but I was trying to talk about housing laws without putting too much in it.
Without talking about it.
Yeah, without talking about it. So.
All right, thank
Thank
you.
you.
Moving on to item 8, informational items, Planning Division staff approvals. I see there's a few.
Actually, I was going to make one quick comment about that. First, thank you, Jolie, so much, and we're glad to have you. And I'll email out that presentation to all the planning commissioners.
Perfect. Thanks, Sharon.
Yeah, so back to 8.1. I was just going to mention the project log, which is that link at the bottom of the, that one-page report. I know I've had some commissioners ask about staff contact, and if you look on the first page, kind of upper right, we have this link called staff directory. We actually had it there before, but the link didn't really work, so we fixed it and also put a brief instruction that when you click on it, it'll take you to the entire city directory, and then you have to click on community development. Yeah, we've tried ways to try to get directly to the community development. It just, website wasn't set up that way. You can't. So that's the way to do it, and thanks to Craig, that link is working, and we have a brief instruction there. Yes.
Is my understanding is that it used to have like dates that it would be coming to Planning Commission. Is there any way that on that? No,
I've never seen
sure
it like
that.
that.
Yeah, this happened
Possible
before.
dates, like we could have.
No.
No, because we will know it when we actually get much closer, when we publish public hearing notice.
Is there any sort of calendar? I mean, obviously, it will ebb and flow depending on how projects move along. But just to get an idea of what's coming, as we've talked before, so that we can read some of those larger specific plans and be prepared. I mean, the worst thing that could happen is that we're over-prepared, right? Prepared in advance.
Yeah, we can try to share at each meeting what might be coming, but sometimes it literally is, that close, or we know what could be.
No, both.
Both. But I mean, as long as we know what's coming up, like in the next couple couple meetings, then, that works. Like, we're going to be seeing this within the next couple months. That gives us time to read a 500-page packet.
Yeah, I mean, we can see what we can do, but, really in the next month, that's the best really we can give you. Some of them, it can really, change.
Yeah.
But even the next month. Yeah, that should be helpful, yeah.
So, if end of the meeting case, so we anticipate coming up in August, which is now 2 weeks away, not a month. But,
Right, I know.
then that way we can start preparing.
Yeah, but some of the projects that's, smaller projects, they're really, it's not posted on the website. Like, for example, what's coming to you in 2 weeks, it's a tentative map for a 3-lot subdivision. So it's not something that's a really large project where we would create a whole website for.
So that's the only thing that's coming.
Yes.
They're doing a tentative map for 3 lots?
3-lot subdivision, yeah, at the northeast corner of
Why aren't they doing the
Church.
parcel? Why aren't they doing the parcel?
I don't know, I have to look into more detail. That's why
Oh,
I
might
kind
be
of
a
kept it
vesting.
tough.
Maybe a vesting tentative?
I have to look at it, yeah.
Great. Thank you. Any questions for Sharon on the 8.1 items? No? Good. Moving on. Number 9, Planning Division report.
All right. So if you recall, back in March, we started this effort to develop the work plan for the Planning Commission and also, a budget derived from the training request. And then the Commission finalized that in April, and we submitted that to Council along with all the other commissions. So when Council approved the budget on June 5th, the training budget, Council approved $10,500 per year. And the work plan that you all developed, that was approved by Council. So I wanted to share that. And then in coordination with Jolie and City Clerk's office, we drafted an email and I sent it to everybody on July 7th, and I sent to Commissioner Fugazi last week after you got appointed. The AB 1234 ethics training. Yeah, I know a few people have completed, so just wanted to remind you by end of September if you can. I do have Commissioner Ramirez when she attended earlier. Yes.
Oh, my goodness.
I submitted mine. Did you get that? Okay.
Yeah. No, I'm glad. I'm glad we're actually talking about this right now because, yes.
No, we're trying to get everybody in sync, and we're doing it with council too.
But this is like what we had to do this year because
Every
I
two.
also
Every
went
2 years.
because I went to the last year I went to the Planning Commission Academy.
Yeah.
take it?
Did you take the AB 1234 there and got the certificate?
No.
Okay.
You'd remember
So-
it. It's fruiting.
Yeah, so if you can take a look at that July 7 email that I have sent with the link to that. Yeah. We would appreciate it. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Sharon. Item 10, Assistant City Attorney report.
No report.
Very good. And with that, I adjourn the meeting to our next regularly held meeting of August 3rd at 6 p.m. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.